Well, welcome everyone. We're really glad to have you here today. My name is Rowan. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of City Hive, and we're one of the partners on the Rise Up project with the Public Health Association of BC. And so, yeah, we're really happy to have you all joining us virtually today. We can go to the next slide. As we are joining this space, this virtual space from physical places ourselves, I think it's really important to ground ourselves in recognizing that myself and my team are located on the unceded ancestral and traditional territories of the Chamaskwiam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. But we work all across what many of us call Metro Vancouver, and that includes the lands of many nations of the Coast Salish peoples, as well as Indigenous peoples from near and far and Métis who call these lands home. And so we want to recognize this acknowledgement and ground ourselves in this place, in part because we are joining from physical spaces and this is a virtual room, but also because this is a commitment as our organization continues to do work to explore what it means to bring in practices of decolonization and indigenization into the work that we do. And especially as you all work in spaces of food systems, that we want to make sure that we're really grounding that in land as well. I did want to flag, I am getting some noise feedback from someone on our call today. I think it might be Carly. I'm getting some background noise there. Thank you so much. No worries at all. Just wanted to grab that before we carry on into some of the meat of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm actually going to just quickly share our agenda, and then I'll pass it over in a moment to the PHABC team as well. So we're starting off, quick welcome for everyone, as I've done. We're going to be chatting a little bit about who the different partners are in this project, specifically PHABC and the Rise Up project, and ourselves here at City Hive. And then as many of you may already be familiar with, we're going to talk about what the value of working with young people and youth volunteers can be, the current realities that they're coming up against, and how we, as either partners or host organizations, can create spaces for them to thrive. And then we'll close it out, and we will have lots of time for questions at the end as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Taylor to share a little bit more about the Rise Up project.
Great, thank you so much, Rowan. Hi everyone, my name is Taylor and I am the project coordinator with the Rise Up project at PHABC. And I've probably been in touch with you via email over the last little while, so thank you for connecting with me. We're really excited to work with you. So before we dive into Miley and Rowan's wonderful presentation, I'd just like to give a little bit more context on PHABC and the overall Rise Up project. So the Public Health Association of BC is a voluntary, nonprofit, non-government, member-driven organization, provides leadership to promote health, well-being, and social equity. And we fulfill our mission through advocacy, collaboration, education, and research, and do this work through the spectrum of a public health practice, including prevention, promotion, protection, and policy. Next slide, please. So Farm to School BC, the BC chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, and Can You Dig It are some of PHABC's initiatives and networks within the Division of Community Engagement and Food Systems here at PHABC. And we're working with these three organizations quite closely throughout the Rise Up project. Next slide, please. So the Rise Up project, which is funded through the Canada Service Corps, was developed after hearing from numerous youth that they wanted more opportunities to get involved in their local food system. The Rise Up project aims to strengthen food systems and environmental stewardship by creating meaningful opportunities for BC youth aged 15 to 30 to become involved in their local food systems. And we're doing so by partnering with organizations like yours, as well as Farm to School BC, Can You Dig It, and the BC chapter of the Coalition for Healthy School Food, like I mentioned. To complement these service placements, we're offering a webinar series and partnering with City Hive to design a custom food systems and civic engagement curriculum. We're also creating opportunities for youth to connect with each other through both in-person and virtual events, including a trip to Vancouver for a 2-day gathering. And lastly, we're exploring opportunities for digital engagement within the food systems sector. And we're doing this by designing a volunteer platform specific to food systems and environmental stewardship work. And we're hoping that this platform will allow nonprofits and small businesses like yourselves to better connect with youth into the future. So that's one of our long-term goals for this Rise Up project. Next slide, please. So this diagram, I hope, helps to provide a bit of a clearer picture of the full program structure. So at the top, we can see that PHABC's partnerships with City Hive and Meaningful Work. City Hive, as I've said, is our main educational partner and the host of this session. And Meaningful Work is helping us to develop this online digital platform. PHABC is also working with our 3 key programs who have regional leads that will be supporting both volunteer host organizations and youth volunteers, acting as that liaison. And I just see there's someone in the waiting room, so I'm going to let them in. Next, we have our volunteer host organizations, and their role is to offer volunteer opportunities for youth, and they remain in communication with their regional lead to coordinate details of those placements and stay in communication. And then we have our volunteers that work with the partner organization or the host organization and remain in communication with their regional lead. Next slide, please. And a few details about the timeline. So in December, we're still in the process of finalizing our volunteer recruitment. And if we're able to match your organization with youth volunteers, our regional leads will be in touch to connect and draft an MOU to determine what that working relationship will look like. We then anticipate that most volunteer placements will begin in January. And at that time, regional leads will also be hosting a gathering, either online or in person, for youth to connect with each other. And all of our host organizations will be invited. You'll also have the opportunity to check in with your regional lead this month and attend an optional educational webinar with a BC food systems expert. And in February, placements will be ongoing. You'll have a monthly check-in with a regional lead and have the opportunity to attend a second webinar. And in March, that's the final month of our program. Placements will continue to be ongoing, and you'll have final check-ins with your regional lead and the option to attend another webinar. Youth will also be invited during this month to attend a 2-day gathering in Vancouver, where they'll get to learn amongst each other and connect in person. And like I said, the last day of this program is March 31st. So we'll have time for questions towards the end of this session, but I'd like to pass it back to City Hive to lead the rest of this session. Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. Yeah, and for context, it's probably helpful to share who City Hive is, who we are. So as Taylor mentioned, we're one of the key partners, the educational partner on this project. We're a not-for-profit based locally. We're on a mission to transform the way that young people are engaged in shaping their cities and their communities. And we've been around for just over 7 years. Really focused on connecting young people with spaces where they have either decision-making power or the opportunity to shape their neighborhood, their community, or their city. We are youth engagement experts. And so today, and as a part of this project, we're bringing that lens to this work and to the overall Rise Up project. So really grateful to get to be here today and to host you all. I know there's probably a lot of expertise in this room that we could also be drawing from. So hopefully we can share something that might be a little bit new for you, but also invite questions and comments a little later on as well if you have anything additional to add. Go to the next slide. We wanted to start off by talking about the value of working with young people. A lot of conversations, maybe you should preface, we are a youth-led, youth-run organization. Our entire staff team, all of our volunteers, all of our program participants are youth 13 to 30. And so we're very familiar with the space. And so often when we have conversations with our partners and with other organizations, conversations about working with young volunteers, working with young staff are couched in either generalizations or generational stereotypes. And so we think it's really important to combat that narrative by talking about what are the real values of working with young people? What are the pieces of the puzzle that they bring to the table that other demographics don't always get to, or don't always become known for. And so the first one I want to share is around creativity and innovation. Young people are exceptional at providing fresh perspectives and creative ideas on challenges or areas that you might be stuck with. Young people's energy and hope and enthusiasm can also be really contagious. And that can be a real spark for organizations, for host organizations, to help invigorate the energy and to shake things up a little bit. The second is around connections to new communities. So a lot of partner organizations that we've worked with in the past might be struggling to reach certain demographics with their programs, their services, their business, their social media accounts. And young people are really great at helping to bridge that gap and support an organization or a business in reaching those new audiences. And it's not just young people that they can help connect a group to. It could be their cultural or their sporting or their religious communities or their school communities that they could also help connect you into. And the third, and definitely by no means the least important, I would say, is that building young people's capacity really does matter. Many of you may have heard or maybe even said the phrase, young people are the leaders of tomorrow. But we like to push back on that and say, not only are they the leaders of tomorrow, but they're also really important present day contributors to our communities. And so on the one hand, we actually have young leaders leading global movements on social justice, on climate change. But on the other hand, a lot of our young people in our communities are actually just trying to figure out what their place is in the face of some of these really big challenges that they're grappling with, whether that's climate change or housing and affordability. And so we have, as partners, as host organizations, a really incredible role in helping youth gain those practical and important volunteer experiences, those life skills to set them up for both their current contributions to our communities, but also the future. And they can also, in turn, really support and set your organization up for success too. I'm actually going to pass it over to my colleague, Miley, and I'll invite Miley. You should also definitely introduce yourself because I skipped over that bit earlier before diving into some of the realities that youth are facing at the moment.
Yeah, happy to do that. Hi, everyone. It's great to see some of you online. I think I've met some of you at the in-person meeting that we had at PHABC maybe it was last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago. Time is kind of weird, but it's great to see some familiar faces. It's great to see some new faces. My name is Miley Leong. I use she, her pronouns. I am the engagement consulting manager at City Hive, and the work that I do really is around working with institutions and organizations around transforming the way that young people are engaged. So I'm really excited that, we have space today to share a little bit about our learnings and what's worked for us, and also to hear about what's worked for you folks or what you folks are seeing in your specific context. So Rowan shared really about the value of working with youth. I'm gonna take us through thinking through what are the systemic barriers and current realities that young people are facing around engaging, around volunteering, and then we'll take us through, some ways to address those. So maybe before I share some of the things that we've seen systemically, I wonder if there are folks that want to share in the chat or unmute and share what are some of the barriers that you've seen or you think that are preventing young people from engaging either with your organization or just organizations in general. What are some of the barriers that you think are coming to light? Is someone saying not having enough time, not getting paid for their time? Absolutely. And similar to that, schedules. Some folks might be working, most folks in like a quote unquote professional context work Monday to Friday daytimes, and youth are often in school, absolutely. Limited time, confidence, access to transportation, and other things that bring independence for sure. And I think a lot of these touch on what we're going to share in the next slide, which is barriers that we've seen and systemically what that looks like with young people who are, navigating all of this. So this has been brought up in different ways. So lack of time or financial means. So some folks have already brought this up, but many youth are students, they're working, oftentimes multiple part-time jobs. They also might have caregiver responsibilities at home. And that means that there's no time. And if there is time, that time is really prioritized in other spaces. So prioritizing around working. And that can be really difficult to find additional time for unpaid volunteer work or any type of engagement work that might be beyond their capacity and what they have available to them. And that might translate to like lack of confidence. And for us, we call this like navigating the isms. So youth have experiences with ageism, and with that, connecting that with multiple different layers of like potentially racism, classism, and that might look like feeling really undervalued or feeling tokenized when they do engage or feel like their time and their thoughts aren't being valued in a very similar way. And that can translate into a lack of confidence when having to navigate all these external isms that are often imposed on young people. And then the third thing is around lack of trust and connections. Youth tend to have lower levels of trust in decision-making institutions, partly because of the isms that folks have to navigate through. Not all youth are provided with equal opportunities to access meaningful and relevant placements or opportunities, especially those that can further their career or education goals. And with that lack of connections, it will connect to kind of a lack of confidence. And all of that really boils down to and becomes a lack of civic and social literacy. So as younger community members, youth may have lack of clear understanding of working expectations, systems of power, because we're not taught these concepts or skills in school or at home. And if folks are already coming from communities that might have other priorities or needs that need to be met, civic and social literacy might not be at the top of that priority list, or might not have the space to really nurture and build up those capacities and skills. So these are some of the things that we've seen across the 7 years that we've been kind of working at City High, but also personally, either in our own experiences or in the work that we do elsewhere. And some of this probably is very familiar to folks who are working with youth often. But I think, we think it's really important to surface like systemically what are the things that are preventing young people from engaging that aren't individualized to what they're doing that's wrong. It's more around thinking through in a systems lens of what's preventing folks from meaningfully and fully engaging in interests and passions that they most likely have and are thinking deeply about and are interested about. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Rowan around addressing some of the barriers that I've outlined here.
Yeah, thanks, Miley. And yeah, I think echoing what Miley was just saying around, it's not about thinking about this as like, oh, it's anyone's particular fault, but these are systemic challenges. And so what are we able to do as folks who work with youth, as host organizations looking to have young volunteers, to create placements that help either respond to or mitigate the impacts of those challenges that the young people coming to spend time with us might be facing. And so we have, based on our experience, found that these 4 that we put up on the screen here, and I'll speak to each of them a little bit more, are a really good foundation. And I'll show some examples of what that's actually looked like at City Hive and for our programming. So hopefully that helps it feel a little bit more tangible as well. But the first is to be flexible and responsive. And this is, I will also add, for all of these, a lot easier said than done. And so it does take some self-reflection and some work to figure out how to implement some of these approaches. But youth often prefer shorter term placements. They may need more flexibility to accommodate changing schedules, changing interests. It might be different than working with, for example, I know some of our partners work with senior volunteers and retired folks, and they might be able to commit significant amounts of hours and significant like duration of time over a term. And that might be a very different arrangement than working with a youth volunteer. And so creating space and having really explicit conversations where youth can identify, you know, what are their needs, what are their interests, where can they actually fit in and really serve what the needs of the organization are too. The second is recognizing that not all, you know, youth is not a monolith. There is no kind of homogenous, you know, one size fits all for youth, just as there isn't for any other demographic either. And so when Miley was alluding to those isms, young people are grappling with many different intersecting identities that will shape the way that they're able to show up in the world. And will also bring with them a unique set of skills and interests. And so bringing forward that equity lens, being open to different socioeconomic realities, different lived experiences, different cultural backgrounds, and some of the changes that might need to happen in order to support those folks to show up as their full selves. The third here is around capacity building, and I'll speak more about these next two in depth on the next slide as well. But where possible, supporting engaged volunteers to connect with further opportunities, thinking about kind of building that ladder, building those skill sets, building the capacity of young people. Maybe it's connecting them with someone in your network who could sit down with them and have a coffee chat or a coaching interview. Maybe there's job opportunities down the line. Offer support to those, especially those who may not be receiving these kinds of resources elsewhere in their lives. It's a really fantastic opportunity to help dismantle barriers and provide a more equitable opportunity for youth from all different backgrounds. And the third is around education and skill building. So thinking about one of those last barriers we were talking about of not having that civic or social literacy, that can also come with not having a literacy or an understanding of workplace or volunteer expectations. So really thinking about with young volunteers, your onboarding process, how can you help them understand the role, the sector you work in, the community that you're a part of, be really intentional about building that knowledge and that skill building piece in an intentional way from the start. And so on the next slide here, I'll share a little bit of an example of how we think about this within our context here at City Hive. The first one is what we call our knowledge to action framework. And this really kind of dovetails off that last point. And that is that almost all of our programming, our engagements, build on this knowledge to action model. What it does is it ensures that participants are provided with a really level playing field to participate. It recognizes and supports different learning styles, and it also embeds a sense of agency within a project or a process. And so how we've done this is that in every single one of our programs, so whether it's a 1-hour workshop with youth, whether it's a 3-month-long program, whether they're participating as a volunteer, as a staff member, they all get to experience this knowledge to action, which means starting off with learning before moving into action projects. And so that in a staff or a volunteer context means starting off with really hands-on onboarding. And within that onboarding session, having them actually practice the skills that we're going to need them to demonstrate in their position. Very tangible example, we have a fleet of volunteer youth facilitators that we work with. And in our onboarding process for those youth facilitators, they came together, they got to meet each other, they got to learn and identify what is a facilitator, what is the role of a facilitator, how are they supposed to facilitate group discussions, and they kind of talk through and learn about the actual knowledge building so that everyone, no matter whether they've facilitated for years or this is their very first time learning about facilitation, they get to be a part of that conversation and level set. And then by the end of the workshop and onboarding, they're actually facilitating group conversations with each other and practicing different kinds of scenarios that they're going to be encountering later on in their volunteer placement. That's just one example with some of our youth volunteers. So really thinking through that kind of knowledge to action component has been important for us, and we use that across everything that we do at City Hive. And the second example that I'll share is around capacity building. And so this really supports participants to lead in their own communities and on their own terms. It focuses on tangible skills, and it really embeds reciprocity. So it's not just about, hey, come volunteer for me and I will get everything that I can out of you. And I'm, you know, maybe you'll like get something out of it in return, but it's actually figuring out, you know, what are the opportunities that I have available to help you build your skills and then go do this in other contexts, or this is going to help your career journey, and be really explicit and open about what you can offer in return. And so maybe an example I'll share about that is we ran a program a couple years ago called the Youth Elections Ambassadors. It was during the 2022, the lead up to the 2022 municipal elections. And we had 4 volunteers from 3 different municipalities come forward, and they their kind of task as volunteers with us was to go out and do youth engagement. They were boothing at different events, basically. But as a result, we also connected them directly with city staff. So they got the opportunity to meet with and learn from people in positions of power, and kind of have that networking opportunity. There was also opportunities for them to define what groups, you know, where they wanted to go do the boothing, how they could do that outreach. They were allowed to bring forward a lot of their innovative and creative ideas to that work and help shape that program. And so it's really figuring out where are the areas where they get to lead and where are the areas where we have to be a bit prescriptive just based on the needs of our organization, and finding that trust and that balance. So that's just like a couple small examples. Want to make sure that we have lots of time for questions at the end. So I'll kind of leave it there, but I'm more than happy to share other examples or answer any questions as well. But would love to invite folks to reflect a little bit on how you might be able to think about shifting existing processes or practices to change the way that you're currently engaging with youth. And so maybe we'll actually pause before we have another slide after this, but before we go there, anyone want to share in the chat or out loud ideas on how you might want to engage with youth a little bit differently? Oh, Sonia, I see a hand raised.
Hi, Rowan. My name's Sonia. I'm the Kamloops Region Community Animator for Farm to School BC. So I get to work with a few people on the call, including Dawn. Woo woo, woo. Sorry, I am also a little sick. I'm just thinking about like engaging with youth. Like my hope is that the youth who are applying for these programs are like quite driven individuals already, especially given the like barriers that exist right now of like time and capacity and energy. I'm really hoping that they, you know, are passionate already. And with that, I guess I'm going to lead into this idea, is that I'm hoping there can be a lot of autonomy given to youth and like a lot of independence to be like, actually, hey, what are you interested in? And you know what, I'm going to trust that you can kind of take care of that yourself and manage your own limits and expectations. And maybe this is me like seeing a silver lining that hasn't been shown to me yet, but like that's my hope, is that these youth actually are gonna, you know, just want to drive the momentum on their own projects. So yeah, I just thought I would share that, just because I think the barriers have increased so much over the past like 20 years from when I used to do a lot of volunteering. I'm hoping folks are just motivated and yeah, happy to support
absolutely. Thanks so much, Sonia. I really appreciate you sharing that, and definitely resonates. I think it can for sure be great to, and I think there are lots of youth who are super self-motivated and super excited to get engaged. And I think there's also a great balance to find around how can we create processes and structures so they know kind of where the expectations are and what the limits are, but also like, you know, all of the space that they do have freedom to create and to build. Which is amazing. We also had a comment in the chat: working remotely when we're not out delivering programs makes it harder to network organically or to have those water cooler chats. So making sure there are opportunities for them to connect with their staff in person or with partner organizations, et cetera, will be important. This is huge, absolutely. I think COVID has really shifted the way that we engage with each other, and especially thinking about how to kind of create that reciprocity, create those networking opportunities, build that community. That's really hard to do online, as we're all experiencing right now. So having a bit more intention about how to build that into a structure is fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing that, Kaylee. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm gonna pass it over back to Miley to kind of wrap up some of our top thoughts, and then we'll have some space for a Q&A at the end.
This is great. I think like we were hoping that we'd have a lot of time for Q&A, because yeah, I think that's also really helpful, and we're learning and strategy and practices sharing happens. So excited to dive into that. I wanted to summarize a couple of key ideas that we feel is really important when thinking about working with young people. So there's 3 on the slide right now, and I'll go through each of them. So the first one that we've kind of alluded to in the beginning is that if it's good for youth, it's likely that it's good for many. Creating placements and processes that are supportive for young people can often mean creating more inclusive and expansive opportunities to engage. When we think about like flexible timing and responsibilities, those work well for young parents or folks who are working multiple jobs and have multiple responsibilities, those who have family care or other work commitments. When we expand the way that we think about engagement and opportunities for young people, it often has a ripple effects in terms of other communities who might have a range of needs that that might not have fit within the status quo way of volunteering or placements. The second one is around transforming challenges into opportunities. So one thing that we feel is really important is being really honest and open about what is and isn't offered. What can and can't be offered in an engagement, in a placement. It's really important to be explicit rather than being like vague about what is possible, because I think that also provides an opportunity for young people to then practice agency in terms of gauging what feels aligned with what they're looking for in terms of capacity and interest. The other kind of side of this point is really around encouraging yourself, your team, your organization to address challenges and really transform them into opportunities for new volunteers to contribute meaningfully to the organization and the community as a whole, and find ways where we can either do things a little bit differently or and also aspire to change the way that status quo practices or systems have been built within how a specific program or placement is structured currently. And I think the last one, as what I mentioned already, is really clearly defining expectations for roles, really listening to young people's interests and being interested in their questions and what they're wanting to get out of a placement. I think what Sonia mentioned around autonomy, like finding the balance of really trusting that young people know what it is that it is that they want to get out of an experience, and also finding structures that support that flexibility and outlining that clearly so that they're able to show up in a way that feels best for them. And if we're not sure how to support young volunteers, it's also okay to just ask. I think one of the beautiful things about working with youth is that folks usually aren't shy in sharing what they think when they're asked, when they're given the opportunity to share honestly and without judgment or repercussions. And folks mostly have like very honest and really constructive feedback around what might work better and what hasn't worked well. And that can be really informative in terms of what changes should be made and what is possible and what's not possible. So these are 3 things that I wanted to kind of summarize in terms of what we've shared so far, and also our experience of working with different youth volunteers and working with different age ranges and communities of youth is it's good to keep in mind these three little packages of thought. And I think with that, we'll have some time for like Q&A, and I think there can be Q&A for like the project and program as a whole, and also any kind of questions around, yeah, supporting with like youth placements and engagement is also welcomed as well. So maybe I'll pass it to Taylor to kind of move us through the Q&A, if that feels good, Taylor.
Yeah, thank you, Miley. And thank you, Rowan, for leading this session. I think it was really insightful, and you've done a really great job of walking us through some of these really important considerations when working with youth. So thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with us all. Also would like to thank everybody else for attending today's session. We're really happy to have been able to host this opportunity. And we're really excited to get going with the rest of the aspects of our project. So this is just a slide about all of the folks, again, who are involved in our project. And yeah, I'd love to open up some time for Q&A. And if you don't want to ask a question in today's session, there's an email address at the bottom of the slide there, and you're welcome to send me an email with whatever your question is.